hearing is closed and the ordinance is laid over for final adoption next week.
Thank you. The City Council will be in recess. Got them. Get them. I did.
Those are bright lights.
So we stayed here during his
Now we're doing the presentation.
They're not going to use the screen behind us.
Just call names. Just not for you. Okay. Just want to see that.
Yes,
Your first budget is a big deal.
yeah, I guess they're using the screen.
Oh, great.
I could use one again. All right. Director Rodriguez, are you ready?
Right.
Okay, Brad, good. All right. All right. I will call the St. Paul City Council Budget Committee to order. Good morning. As mentioned earlier, here we are in beautiful Ward 3 in this beautiful rec center on a beautiful fall day. Nevertheless, it's a bit clunky to do a budget presentation in this space, especially with the screen behind us and some kind of ringy microphones, but I appreciate our media team for putting this together for us, and we'll make do. I think that actually hearing a parks presentation in a rec center is kind of lovely, so we'll roll with it. Today, Director Rodriguez will present his budget presentation for the very first time, which is always fun for council members and directors. So we look forward to hearing your budget proposal, and a reminder that it is the intention of the council to hear the kind of top line budget overview from each of the largest departments before we set the levy limit, which we do next week. So that we have just a kind of a sense of the broad dollars and cents in front of us. We will set the levy limit, and then that really kind of puts the ceiling on the work in front of the council, and has been our practice for many years. We work to bring the number down, and we have done so successfully. So that's kind of our starting point, and we'll work from there. So if we go through this presentation and it appears that we'd like to invite the Parks Department back for a few more questions, we may do that, or if we nail it all today, we won't. So just welcome, Director Rodriguez. It's wonderful to have you here today, and we look forward to the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. Council President Brenmo and council members, thank you for the home game here at Highland Park Community Center. Very much appreciated. This center means a lot to me. This is the center that I grew up at as a kid. This is my first place of employment, was in this very building, working in the smartphone program. So a lot of mentorship, lessons learned from a young Andy in this space. So to be able to have my first budget presentation here means a lot. So appreciate that, and thank you. A few housekeeping items. We're obviously using PowerPoint for this presentation, but you have your budget memo that we had sent previously. But if you have questions along the way, just let us know and we'll do our best to answer. But we want to start out this presentation by acknowledging and highlighting the work of our staff over the last year. I think at times we can take for granted all the work that we do within the park system. We're a 4,000 acre system, 181 buildings, rec centers, aquatics facilities, trails, hundreds of programs and services for all ages. It's easy to get lost in the shuffle of all the accomplishments that we do in a year. So we're going to spend some time on the next few slides just to show you some highlights across different work divisions. But kicking that off, we're the #2 park system in the nation via the Trust for Public Land Park Score system, and we've been in the top 3 for the past 8 years. We intend to stay there, hopefully coming for that #1 spot at some point, but how do we get there? And if you look at the system plan work that's highlighted on this slide, that is a good example of how we get to that #1 spot. We're talking about engagement and really planning out the blueprint for our future, and that's what we've been doing with Livable Cities, our consultant in our department, over the last year to really streamline the future in terms of decision making around infrastructure, future park amenities, and other elements within our system that makes us a premier status. I hear a lot from you all about skate parks and pickleball and other things, and how do we implement those across our system and do it in an equitable and sustainable way. That's what the system plan will do for us. It'll be a blueprint for our future for the next 10 to 15 years. So we're excited about that work. We should have a draft of that within the first quarter of 23, along with some community meetings to review findings that will be held in the coming weeks here. Surveys have been out. As you see on the screen here, we had a young resident really advocating for new swings within their park space. So we're excited about that work.
Before you switch slides, Ms. Naker is just smitten with that picture, and I think, but I also will say that I really appreciate this initiative that you're kicking off. The way people use parks, the way people, interact with the city is constantly changing, and if we get locked into the way that we used to do things, we're not serving our community well. The opportunity to really look at how are baseball fields being utilized these days, and is this the best use of space, and or do we need to compress things or move them around? If we're not doing this on a regular basis, we are really missing a grand opportunity to move up that list to the #1 position, which I feel like is within our reach. But I'm very excited that we're doing this and that we're doing this now. I think the time is right.
Thank you, Council President. Appreciate that. Right, next one there. Recreation services, so that's our 26 rec centers, that's our mobile rec unit, our youth athletic office, our adaptive rec program. This work division has seen probably the most transformation over the last few years coming out of COVID. Really innovative in their service delivery, not just working within the four walls of a rec center, but really meeting kids where they're at. Going out into passive parks, going into neighborhoods, programming at Sibley Manor where park spaces, few and far between, are not accessible for them to get to. Really just trying to meet kids where they are and provide quality programs and services. But thanks to ARP funding, we eliminated fees for the next 3 years for youth athletics for ages 10 and up. That's a big deal. We're in the middle of basketball registration right now. We're peaking towards 900 young people being registered for that program. With a couple weeks yet to go. That was the total amount we had last year. So we'll exceed participation numbers from last year for basketball, and we expect to continue to do that in the coming seasons. Really starting to see teams and others, teams coming out of rec centers for sports that we haven't seen before. Soccer at Dayton's Bluff, or baseball teams and rec centers that have never had them. So it just shows that eliminating those fee barriers really plays a role in providing services to our young people across the city. You'll hear a lot about this in different slides, but throughout our department, partnership is emphasized to a maximum in terms of what we do. There's so much power in collaboration and not duplicating service, but working together to serve the community. So that is very much a theme in rec services, as it's noted on this slide. Want to give a shout out to our professional sports team, specifically the Minnesota United and the St. Paul Saints, who helped to renovate facilities for us this year. We have a new soccer field on the east side at Arlington Hills Community Center, complete with irrigation and new natural grass. Previous to that, it was an uneven field with rocks and just a very poor space that we didn't have funding to support. They really stepped up and put a new amenity in that space, and it's a premier field now on the east side for us to program in the future. St. Paul Saints and others are another example of field renovations. Continuing with the theme in special services, which is aquatics, skis, and contracted service. Aquatic ski, golf, and contracted service, continuing with the theme of fee reductions or elimination. We awarded 300 scholarships this summer to youth across the city for free swim lessons. Partnering with JK Movement, Westside Boosters, and others, youth-led community organizations to recruit participants to participate in that program. Not only registering them, but finding out ways to get them there via transportation and making sure that those programs are accessible to those young people across the city. Safety education around water is super important, and it's been a point of emphasis for our aquatic staff over the past year plus to really promote that across the city for our young people. We'll be implementing a new cross-country ski loop at Battle Creek this winter, expanding our ski operations. That is in partnership with Ramsey County. So the rec center will be doing the ticketing and the issuing of ski equipment, and working right next door to the regional park, who's our established partner there. And then lastly, I just want to highlight the work of aquatics in terms of their recruitment for seasonal hiring. When there's a lifeguard shortage across the state, beaches are being shut down or unguarded, or other agencies haven't been able to staff their pools. We did not have that problem this year. And that's a testament to the recruitment and the youth work strategies that the staff within aquatics have built to really build a solid team across those pool locations. 300 lifeguards, admission attendants, and other things this summer that really up the ante for those services, and just showcase that we were able to keep those facilities open and accessible to everyone within the community.
And people were watching social media, they definitely saw like David and others like amping up the lifeguard training, and you kind of got the feeling like if you weren't on in the lifeguard training, you were really missing out. It was kind of all the cool kids were at lifeguarding, and he made it look like a blast. It's good to hear the numbers.
Following up on youth leadership, our youth commission, under the supervision of Mua Zhang, has steady participation this year in a full program, going from 7 kids a couple years ago to 20 kids across the city. If there are community issues within your ward or things that need youth voice, I would strongly advocate to reach out to Mua and the youth commission. They're an amazing group of young folks that really do great work. And we continue to champion the youth commission within the Parks and Recreation Department. Also noting, we completed our first year of youth on boards with 10 youth serving on 5 boards and commissions. Examples of that are the CIB committee, the Business Review Council, Transportation Committee, really just focusing on that civic leadership for young people and getting them involved in the process. We're working towards implementing 2 youth seats within the Parks Commission as well, that hopefully we can implement within 2023. Right Track has a lot going on, so much that we had to have 2 slides. So for this first one, just noting 121 employer partners, 43 new are returning since 2019. We developed a new partnership with 3M to get high school students into professional level internships within that space, working actually on campus at 3M, which was such a valuable experience for those young folks in terms of career pathways and what they want to do with their future professional career. When you're working with young people, you're talking about deadlines, getting payroll packets in, all those things. That can be a little complicated. So we created a system for 200 youth to complete a late application and enroll in time for a summer internship. So that just shows that we're being flexible in our processes to try and accommodate young people as much as we can in getting them into positions. Many of those youth were referred, are identified and referred by our community ambassador partners throughout different neighborhoods. So working again with community agencies to really find young people and bring them into professional level internships. Really want to highlight the partnership with the St. Paul School District. As a young person, you could be faced with, do I want to work this summer, or do I need to make up the credits that I missed in school? We've merged those 2 things so they don't have to make that decision anymore. So we've worked with the school district to create a credit recovery program. 33 English and 24 social study credits were earned during the summer of 2022. So we're super excited about that. And then we created a pharmacy technician academy with CVS. That's just another example. As more employers come on board with Right Track, it brings the versatility of what we can do in terms of offering careers and pathways in different industries. Como Park Zoo and Conservatory, the return of Sparky came back this year. So Sparky came back to Como Harbor, and we celebrated that with public art statues across the city. Those are very well loved, placed in parks all over. We launched a 2-year Zookeeper Right Track Apprentice program to help build a career track within the zoo and help in an effort to diversify that industry, specifically at the zoo at Como. 801,000 visitors last year, total annually. As of late August, we're at 840,000. So we will exceed 1 million this year, and that's going back to pre-pandemic levels of where the zoo used to be. So I say that in just acknowledging that the volume of our park spaces, the zoo, other park spaces have been significantly well used over the last few years coming out of the pandemic. Operations, the nuts and bolts of what we do, literally, Port Authority partnership and EAB progress. We have a slide on that later, but happy to report we remain on track to eliminate EAB on public property by the end of 2024 and have our 1-for-1 tree removal planting goal by 2026. For capital maintenance, there are many things we could list here, but it's just a drop in the bucket in terms of what our deferred maintenance backlog is. You can see that the new HVAC and AC were installed at some sites. Some of those locations were as a result of copper wire theft at the rec center, like taking apart AC units, and those things really affects the end user. Our young people are adults, so we have to absorb those costs and figure out ways to fund them. Community First Public Safety, we're currently serving 116 households. I want to stress with this program that it's very much about social, emotional learning, life skills, day-to-day mentorship, mental health support. We have a great youth worker team that works with these young people and their families on those things every day. But it's also about experiences. As you can see on the bottom there, those kids that are on a Como Zoo field trip, many of them had never been there before. They live in this community but have never been to the zoo. So that even that just small experience of going there has been so powerful for them. And then you see them working on a soapbox derby vehicle for our first annual soapbox derby competition that we had across rec centers this year. So a very valuable experience.
And I do appreciate that slide. The previous one, I was going to ask if we weren't being intentional about bringing Summer Blast kids to Como Zoo too. I mean, it's a good opportunity to remind people that about 15% of the visitors to Como Zoo are from St. Paul.
Yep.
And the rest are from the suburban and outstate, exurban, and out of the state entirely. And so making sure that our own community members get to visit the space that we curate and spend a lot of capital getting funded at the Capitol is important. And especially this group of kids, just to be like, this is your city and this is what is available to you for free is great. It just makes me really happy to see that picture. I saw Rebecca had a hand up and maybe somebody else. No, Rebecca.
Thanks, Council President. Director Rodriguez, I first of all want to really thank your team for the amount of data that's being collected here. I know it's there's so much that goes into one slide with some numbers on it, and I think often we see lists of programs, but we often don't see the actual outputs and the numbers that are behind those programs. So thank you for taking the time to do that. It's incredibly impressive. I'm curious, I mean, everything that your team does is community first public safety, but in this particular slides context, the serving 116 households, is that just the Awakenings program, or are there other programs that you're considering under this bucket?
Yeah, it's focused on the Awakenings program under the Community First Safety bucket. We do, as you mentioned, we do a lot of work around that topic, but specifically this slide is focused on Awakenings and the program and impacts that we're bringing in based on that program. I think that was all I had for that slide, and we'll cover that more later too. Design and construction, I've said this to our design and construction manager and others. I've gained a new appreciation for their work over the last 4 months and what they do. I had an inkling before, but really taking a deep dive in terms of engagement, partnership, communication, and the interdepartmental networking that goes into planning a new park space or a new rec center is very significant. So they do a lot of great work. But we had 2 new grand openings this summer at Highland Bridge with Unchimaka and Gateway Park, with the rounding third base for spring of next year. But also the Summit Avenue Regional Trail, the River Learning Center is approaching the end of the, almost at 90 or 100% schematic design, and then the St. Paul River Balcony continues to advance. So those are very large and significant projects that have impacts for the entire city. And our design team has spearheaded those and led the way, so they've been doing great. Getting into the more technical side of things, this is our org chart broken down by work division. As you'll see in the bottom right corner, we have the ARP FTEs kind of separated out there. More on that soon in future slides, but just wanted to provide us a perspective of kind of the work that's done across work divisions and how it's broken down. This slide is showing the breakdown of where our general fund spending goes. You'll see that over half goes to our recreation division and the operations, trades, and maintenance staff that help to support those facilities and the rest of our 4,000 acre system. That's your plumbers, your pipe fitters, things of that nature that really keep our system running behind the scenes. This breaks down our general funding a little bit further. We may have mentioned this in the past, but we spend very little on materials, supplies, and services out of the general fund. The majority of those things are fee supported. Primary general fund spending is direct employee expenses, building utilities, which we saw a significant increase this year, and vehicle expenses. This breaks out our special fund spending as a reference point. You'll note that a lot more of our zoo and conservatory spending is supported by non-general fund resources. So that could be revenues collected, fees, grants, or other opportunities. That's the same for special services as well, or similar. Finally, moving from background into this budget proposal, as we presented our recommendations to the mayor, we focused on these three core strategic objectives, and it really emphasizes getting back to the basics, or prioritizing the basics in our core critical programs and services, as well as building out partnerships, like we talked about in previous slides, really leveraging other agencies and whatnot to advance projects or programs forward, and partnering where possible. You'll see in the community first public safety line there that we're developing or continuing to develop a relationship with the Office of Neighborhood Safety, figuring out how our community first public safety works alongside that work unit, and the overall parks department. But really just focusing on the basics and core of our service.
Director Rodriguez, before you move on, this is connected to this slide, but also to the strategic planning. I just want to underscore this council's request in the past to that the Parks Department works more closely with the parks or with the St. Paul Public Schools in terms of facilities and things that we might be able to share. And I know that Mr. Meyer and Mr. Russell have been working with John Commerce and in the past to look at the feasibility of that, but we know that many of the schools' facilities sit empty in the summer when we have the most high demand of our services, and it seems like there's opportunities to it's all the same bucket of taxpayers funding these things, and so any way to find ways to double down on the usage of those spaces, whether it's exterior or interior. We've talked about can we use the public pool at Washington Tech or Como High School to do some of this indoor swimming lessons that we're talking about. And I know that's on your radar. I just know that also that my colleagues and I have been really interested in seeing that, collaboration increase. I know our previous school board member Marnie Zhang was leading on that, and unfortunately we lost her, and I don't know if a champion has emerged on the school board that is driving that in that direction as well, but it's important to us, and I think there's an opportunity for cost savings, or at least moving up that rung to the #1 park system if we're finding ways to collaborate with our schools.
Council President Brenmone, I appreciate that comment, and my answer to that is definitely a priority. The St. Paul Public Schools is our closest partner in many ways for shared facility use for programs. They just awarded us hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own ARP funds to implement programs inside their schools. But yes, that is very much a priority for shared facility use and how we can enhance that further. Yeah, absolutely. This is a slide just showing the breakdown a little further. Let me see here. Just lost my place there. You'll see that our general fund has grown from 22 to 23, which is primarily comprised of the additional support for bringing in the new parks at Highland Bridge, the operating and staffing that goes there, some HVAC and air quality improvements, the infusion of funds for the Awakenings program back in 2021, and then the rather large reduction we had to take in 2021 as a result of COVID budget cuts and other things, which were restored via ARP, and we'll talk about that again in a couple slides. Here's a quick snapshot of the 2023 budget changes, a one-time reduction from our Great River Passage General Fund with where those projects are at currently. We could do a one-time infusion of $50,000. to help offset or help balance the city's budget this year. An infusion of funds of $549,000 for the new park system, the new parks coming online at Highland Bridge, and then additional van transportation addition for Community First Public Safety Awakenings to help them get to A to B, to get them to the zoo or other locations. We have 5 vans across the city within parks for 26 rec centers, so it can be a little competitive in terms of how those are allocated equitably. But in order for that program to grow, they need dedicated transportation. And then the park permit year-round reduction, which we'll spend more time on, is a pretty incremental change, and it's focused on a few select park buildings, not the entire system of park permits and picnic buildings, but I'll elaborate on that further here shortly.
Thanks, Council President. Director Rodriguez, I noticed that we're allocating about $550,000 for park staffing at Highland Bridge, and your previous slide showed that in 2022 we allocated about $334,000 for staffing at Highland Bridge. Obviously, we need to staff as we expand an entire new neighborhood of our city, but I'm just curious if you can speak to how many additional staff do you anticipate that we're going to need, or should we be expecting to see these kinds of figures of increase over the next few years as the development rolls out, or is this it? Maybe some of the differences between these staff and what we have already staffed up.
Yeah, thank you, Council Member Naker, for that question. We can provide that information in a future slide. We'll have a FTE breakdown that we can look at. But for other park developments and things over the next couple of years, whether it's Highland Bridge or others, I mean, we have an established five-year plan of what we want to prioritize and get done. But with that comes investment on the back end. I mean, that is preferable, and we'll talk about deferred maintenance and other things in future slides. But when we build new parks or other things, we need the resources to maintain them. So I just want to make sure that point's known. It's like bringing those new parks online it might require more plumber support for the water features, or it might require additional carpenter to help keep it to a high level. So we can certainly follow up with that info. Here's the summary of the FTE changes. So you can see for Ford Highland Bridge, the FTE increases as a result of the funding we just mentioned, the one-time GRP reduction. The rest are specific to right track and other technical changes that we made throughout the year. And then finally, our ARP status page, just noting the different FTEs that were reduced in 2021 and then brought back via these funds. It's very much a priority for us to maintain these in future budget cycles, knowing the impact that it's had on our system, the ability to keep rec centers open later, aquatics facilities staffed, really all those front-facing public services. So that's something that we are prioritizing with our partners in OFS for the future budget cycle, but just making it known that we intend to solve that in the future budget cycle.
Thanks, Council President. Director Rodriguez, you're doing amazing, and you're going so fast that it's answered. I'm really trying to keep up.
Good strategy.
That's why I know it's a very good strategy. So going back one slide, so it's a 13.2 FTE increase in 2023.
Yep.
But most of that is being funded, it looks like, through ARP and special funds. So they're not showing up in your budget changes that you mentioned in a previous slide. It's just the Highland Bridge 4 FTEs that are new from the general fund. Am I understanding this right?
That sounds correct, Councilmember Naker, yes.
And then and again, potentially now or for follow-up, I'm curious if those additional 9.2 FTEs we can expect to come back onto the general fund at any point, or if those are going to stay special fund. I'm curious about the ARPs and just any others that are grant funded that might become general fund funded, because 13 FTEs is a huge increase. Yeah. And I'm glad it's not all in the general fund, but I'm just curious about the future.
Yeah, Councilmember Naker, that's a discussion that we will have with our partners in OFS to solve. But I would anticipate that they would hopefully have to come back to the general fund in order for it to be sustainable once this funding is depleted. Okay.
And I think that we can put that in the follow-up file. I know that's something that since the beginning of ARP funding, we've talked about the re-entry program. And so if we can just make sure as you work through that with OFS that we get updates on it. And I know it's top of mind for all of us at some point you know,
Right.
we have to face it. It's not going anywhere. But just understanding what's the path, I think would be helpful for the council to understand.
Got it. Thank you for that. This slide shows the incremental increase as we have brought the new parks and amenities online at Highland Bridge. There's closeout design costs for the site and project and required increases for staff that we've been referencing. We'll hopefully be able to initiate this as soon as the budget is adopted, as 2 of the parks are already open, 2 of the 4, and then we have a 3rd one opening in the spring. So they've been amazingly used since they have been open. If you have not been to that skate park, I would highly encourage you to go check it out. Councilmember Tolbert and I have talked about seeing people, young people at 7 a.m. in the morning as we drive up Ford Parkway, utilizing that space. So very well loved spaces over there. These costs represent the bare minimum staffing to support the new parkland within that development. Without these additions, we wouldn't be able to deliver the service that the community would expect, from mowing to trash to natural area maintenance for those park spaces. So that's really what it supports. Circling back on Community First Public Safety and Transportation, the van transportation addition will open up opportunities for staff to better plan, execute activities and programming that offer new and unique experiences. As I mentioned, often for the first time for our young people in this program. So dedicated transportation is critical for this program to grow, and that's why it's in this budget proposal. Park permit year-round reduction. Seasonal staffing in our maintenance and operation division continues to be a critical challenge. During the non-summer months, demand for permits go way down. And over the last several years, changes have been implemented to further encourage interested permit seekers to utilize recreation centers and other facilities that are fully staffed in the non-summer months. And when we're talking about picnic buildings, we're talking about spaces like Newell Park, the Como Streetcar Station. Those have typically operated year-round, but what this proposal outlines is a modification of that timeline in operating from Memorial to Labor Day, really scaling back and redirecting those permit requests to rec centers that are nearby. The proposed change is focused around the buildings that I mentioned, but also cementing in some of the weekend and nighttime hour reductions that we've implemented for this fall. It's a change that doesn't have a huge impact, as the permits are very few and far between during the off season, what I would say, from fall to spring. We're just redirecting them to a different park space. I know there was some talk or maybe some confusion that this was across the department in terms of when we would initiate park permits for other pavilions or picnic shelters or other things, but it doesn't have an impact on those spaces. It's just these core buildings.
I think it's just an opportunity to put this on the record, and it's probably a conversation that we need to have with HR, but I've mentioned to you, Director Rodriguez, that number of 20 out of 56 available park worker one jobs has been, noticed out in our parks with overflowing garbage cans, et cetera.
Yep.
But I have talked to at least 3 young people who applied and never heard back from the city. So I'm very concerned that that number is, I don't know, it's the opposite of deflated because
Sure.
of some kind of a disconnect between our hiring process and parks. And when we connected the person with parks directly, they were hired. So that's very concerning, especially in the summer where we were like, oh, sorry, we just don't have enough people to do
Right.
these things. It's like, well, actually, there's people who want the job. So we'll bring that up with HR as well, and maybe try to get some specific examples. But I want to mention this here as well to my colleagues, so that there's awareness of that. It was concerning throughout the course of the summer to hear that from various people.
Council President Brenmo, I appreciate that comment. Things fly fast and furious for seasonal hires, especially when we're working with younger aged prospective employees, but we can always improve in that area or look at process and how we do things different, whether that's through hiring sessions or at the park or other things. But we did do some exhaustive recruitment efforts around that as well. We eliminated the driver's license requirement and raised some of the wages, working with our partners in HR. I still think we'll anticipate seasonal hiring challenges in the future, but also have to look at how to do things a little differently. within our ops unit when it comes to seasonal work, whether that's through Right Track or other partners that might be able to help supplement some work. But also our other partners in Public Works that does similar stuff. Like, is there a way for a collaboration on vegetation management or things like that that people notice? So really just trying to think non-traditionally as well. But I appreciate that, and we can look into that further as well. If there are names or other things, we have good record keeping, so we can always see kind of what the paper trail was if there is existing. So.
And I appreciate that response and on many levels. And I will also say that when we met with DSI last week or the week before, what's going on? I don't know what week it is anymore. I think another kind of nexus was between the HART team and encampment cleanups and parks, who gets sent from DSI to clean up abatement orders, and that perhaps we need to move the HART team to be more of like the kind of cleanup properties crew and have the parks focus on the parks. And that might make it easier for us to recruit parks workers if they're working in the parks,
Yep.
like the title would imply. So I think that there was reception when we talked to DSI about that, but also just so you know that was a quick conversation that we had when they came to speak with us, and I think that ties into the Parks Worker One question and some of the innovation you're talking about as well.
Council President Brenmoen, thank you for that. Director Weezy, Director McCarthy, myself have had ongoing conversations about that very topic. Abatement for us is not mission-related work within the Parks Department, so how we exit out of that and really, again, going back to the theme of focusing on the core objectives and basics, is a path that we want to solve. There are some financial implications there with positions and other things that we need to work through, but it's something that we're definitely exploring.
Thank you. Ms. Prince.
Yeah, and this has to do with a few different things that you've talked about.
Sure.
One is, as a city, as a Parks Department, we've always found money to create new facilities. And we never have enough money, as you pointed out. We have a huge backlog in maintenance. And one of the concerns I have, and this is, we have a ward system. So when I hear that we're adding parks maintenance staff for the Ford Highland Bridge site, I really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. At the same time, vegetation has never been managed at Mounds Park. Mm-hmm. And this has been as long as I have, since a lot of improvements were made to put in the beautiful overlook. There is no view from Mounds Park because there is no vegetation management. Right now we're working with the Dakota tribes who've been very active and involved in really making clear that this park is a sacred site. Mm-hmm. And so they are intent upon installing some new natural prairie plantings. The natural prairie plantings at Mounds Park are not maintained. It has taken acres of the park out of any kind of useful service. So I need to say that I am really concerned that as we create new parks and create new opportunities for people in a beautiful new part of town, that we need to look at the equity issues. How are we treating the parks that we have in other areas where people rely so heavily on parks? So I just want to make that comment. I think we really do have to address this from a citywide perspective. Vegetation management doesn't happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Prince, thank you for those comments. Very well said. And what I'll say there too, just to clarify, there's a strong difference between our parks workers that clean up trash and mow the lawns and other things versus maintaining the natural areas. So for our natural resource techs, as an example, I think we have around 3 full-time positions for the entire city to maintain. items like that. So we rely strongly on volunteers and others to help maintain those spaces. That could be a potential solution there. But for long term, when we do add new parks or other things, we really have to look at that back end work of adding positions to help support it. That's the only way we'll succeed in the future. And it's a very well said point and something I feel strongly about, that deferred maintenance backlogs, the proper staffing levels, all those things go into play of what the front-facing product looks like to our park users. And as Council President Brenmo mentioned, people notice. And if we can't actively get to those things in a timely fashion, what are the pathways to get them done? And that's traditionally been handled by volunteers traditionally. So looking for innovative solutions for future cycles and how we can get that to be better.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, but also mention that, to your point, Ms. Prince, as you said, it's always easiest to get money for shiny, bright new objects, and we know that the maintenance is a challenge. We will see that same kind of investment on the east side with Hillcrest, and the same issue will come up, and that bright, shiny thing will be funded, and then we'll have to talk about the maintenance. But I think that it feels like this council beats the drum of maintenance, because it just is part of the cost of a project, and if we don't keep them up, it becomes an eyesore. Ms. Sneaker had a hand up.
Thanks, Council President. I'm wondering if you can speak to, this is about a future proposed service reduction, but given the staffing shortages that you've mentioned, can you talk about any other service reductions that we've had to make just in the past year? I know that I learned from a constituent, not from your department, that we had decided to not have our standing restrooms open except when parks are permitted, and only have porta potties instead. And that was disappointing to me. Again, going back to the point that Ms. Prince made, we physically invested in a standing restroom and plumbing and infrastructure, and then they're not open when people are there unless someone has paid for a permit to use the park, which seems completely inequitable. So I found out that was happening from a constituent, and I know that this is something that was done just because of staffing shortages, but are there other changes that we've made this year for the sake of, because we have not enough staff?
Councilmember Naker, the change that you just highlighted was the core change within the park system during picnic season. That's a result of the short seasonal labor that we had. We attempted to keep them open, but quickly realized that we could not maintain them to a standard that we need to for the public, that the public deserves. And that's part of that is unfortunate with just some of the things that happen within those bathroom spaces. But again, I think when we can solve or maybe reconfigure for next year, I don't anticipate that being an issue. We want to keep those spaces open and allow folks to use them. But in this instance, we had to make a decision to kind of reduce service there, I'll say.
It's no one loves a porta potty, but they can be plopped anywhere and sprayed out with the hose, and it's think that that is, again, our value is to have those facilities.
Council President Brenmo, I would say the official sign of summer in the Parks Department is when the porta potties are out and tipped over or knocked over. That's when we know summer is here. So, yeah.
And I want to come back to porta potties later, but not right now.
On to a few more positive items. EAB, thanks to the new funding partnership with the port, we've increased the number of removals, stumps, and planting we've done this year. As you can see, we've doubled the amount of removals from last year. There's 5,000 remaining ash within the city that will be removed by fall 2024. Stumping continues. We've tripled the number of stumping contractors, shooting for end of 25 for that. Planting more than 4,500 trees to be planted in 2022. Establishing a jobs program through Tree Trust in 2023 to plant more trees across the city, and then also working with the St. Paul Parks Conservancy for a tree donation program that we can implement across the city as well. We will be very happy when we don't have to talk about EAB in the future. So we've made significant progress there. Where we've been a little bit unsuccessful is around the pruning. So we've been prioritizing removals and stumping, but we issued an RFP a couple months ago and did not get anything back from the contractors. And that seems to be a problem for other municipalities as well. Contractors are busy. So we're working to figure out how we can creatively do that. I do want to stress that we are getting to the pruning that is safety related. If a stop sign is blocked or a cross light or something like that, we do get to those. I think we've responded to about this year, over 800 calls about pruning related to safety. So we're definitely getting those done. But the other, I'll say, non-emergency pruning work continues to generate a backlog, and we're figuring out how we can best get that completed. Our annual slide on deferred maintenance, as you can see, the CIB, the annual maintenance funding that we received over the last few years. Again, just a reminder for those amounts, and keeping into context the size of our system, 4,000 acres, 180 buildings, 26 rec centers. We have a lot to maintain. There's a lot that fails and requires creative solutions. And often we're faced with, should we fix this or that? Do we fix the statue with the water feature in Como Park, or do we fix the AC at the rec center? Those are hard decisions, but we probably want to fix the AC at the rec center first. We've done a lot of work on this over the last couple of years, specifically working with Amoresco and an asset management study. And as you can see, kind of that facility index, in 2017, we started with a $57 million backlog. That percentage continues to grow, 15.3. 2023, we're projected to 17.1, $102.2 million backlog. But we're reaching points where critical status. So you've talked about bathrooms and play areas and other things, but we might be getting into situations now. It's like, do we have to remove that equipment from the play area? Or do we need to shut this bathroom down?
I'm going to say yes with the moldy swing.
Yeah.
I'm going to just step in and say, go ahead. On this question, can you talk at all about, we know that we're leveraging bond dollars for deferred maintenance. Are we earmarking it for this? Or what does the process do? Can you or anyone here from budget answer that?
Council President Brenmo, I would defer to OFS on the process, but from a parks perspective, what I would say, we're very hopeful on that $24 million that the mayor proposed in deferred maintenance. We hope to receive the lion's share of funding.
$24 million.
For that. But our trails, play areas, HVAC systems, roofs, various building elements are failing or have failed. And we can't continue to put Band-Aids on things. Like, we need an infusion of funds to really start attacking this work. That's critical to our rec center system, our aquatics buildings, our zoo, everything that we do.
Yeah. Okay. And it looks like Tara's ready to share the process with us, but I appreciate that response. And also I think because of the Amoresco study, we're all very keenly aware of, Parks has a lot of facilities and a lot of trails and et cetera that we do maintain. 24 million sounds like a lot of money until you look at the number, $102 million backlog. It's like, that gets us a quarter of the way there. Ms. Bernack.
Council President, the important thing to note about the deferred maintenance process is that the plan for the new money has not been developed yet. There is an existing process that allows for the facility managers across the city, so any of the departments that have significant facilities, to come together and deliberate on everyone's applications. We imagine that part of that, at least part of the deferred maintenance capital, would go through that type of process, and that we don't have the process completely mapped out because it was a relatively new piece of the mayor's budget.
Great. Thank you for that. And I guess I would, speaking for myself, likely for my colleagues, we do these studies like the Amoresco studies so we know where the problems are, and so hopefully once the process is worked out, we can go get right at it. I know we seem to love our processes here, and things take a really long time. It's hard to get money out the door, and these things cannot wait any longer. So if the dollars are there and we know where the problems are, let's spend the money and get on track. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Yeah, I want to echo that and double down on it as well. We talk about this every single year, and I think every single year I keep waiting for a proposed budget that actually has a proposal for how to address this. And 24 million is a drop in the bucket when it comes to our deferred maintenance. It sounds like it's not all going to go to parks. It's going to be spread out across the city based on different facilities managers' applications. I would really be curious to hear more from Director McCarthy or from anyone else who was part of the discussions about the budget this year. What is our plan? I mean, we can't keep coming back year after year. I know Public Works has not yet presented to us, but we have the same issue with our streets. We need a systemic solution to a systemic problem. So I don't know if the answers are forthcoming right now, but I think this budget season we need to get at this.
Sure, I'm happy to respond to that if you'd like. I think
Come up to the spelling bee mic first.
Yes. First spell budget.
right, could you use it in a
The
sentence?
word is deferred.
Right. Council President Bremo and Councilmember Naker, I think as we've presented regularly to this group, our biggest challenge is that, to get after the capital needs, both on the street maintenance and the facility maintenance side, we need to borrow money. That's not part of our annual budget, operating budget. And in order to pay back that money, it's a property tax hit. And so we try to balance our property tax needs with our debt as we do with our operating side. I think this proposal that we have in this year's budget is a creative use of we've been doing a lot of strong debt management to free up resources to be able to go after deferred maintenance, and I'm super happy that we actually have a plan in place to try to start getting after that because, when we have new pots of money, often they go to new projects, and so this is a great use of these resources. But, I hear your point, and it is a challenge, and that's like, as Director Rodriguez said, it's a drop in the bucket of the need.
Yeah, and I would be interested in the ongoing conversation about new revenue sources. I mean, I think we keep coming back to property taxes, but there are sales taxes. There are new revenue sources that, I think other cities are likely in the same situations that we're in that we could be exploring. And I don't hear about that ongoing conversation to really be creative and get at this. So I am happy to be part of those conversations, but I don't know, that picture and hearing year after year that we really don't even have a plan to get to a plan is just very frustrating.
Sure.
And I appreciate I do want to make sure that we acknowledge and appreciate the fact that we have found this, or we are prioritizing this $24 million to maintenance, but definitely agree about, the problem's not going away. I also think it's important to point out that some deferred maintenance, like all of us have on our homes or our cars, I mean, it's natural, it's normal, and we do have to prioritize. Like, even if we had $102 million, I don't think that we would spend it all on the parks facilities this next year. But if every single penny went to parks, we still have other departments that would be really frustrated and have their own things. And so we do need to innovate and figure out ways that we can generate those resources, especially as we know that demands will be increasing with the addition of Hillcrest and Allianz and Bridge, et cetera. And the only way that we can capture those dollars is by increasing the levy. So.
And Council President Bremner and Councilmember Naker, the last thing I'd add to that is, happy to have continued conversations about creative additional revenue sources. The sales tax one is one that we've obviously talked about for a long time. I think we are, as you all know, relatively restricted on what statute allows in terms of, the ones that have been approved more recently are much more, you have to have 4 specific or a handful of specifically identified projects. And so how we can operate within that statute to get after our much bigger, maintenance, especially on the street side, needs is a challenge. And so having to figure out how we, can navigate those, those statutory restrictions on what we would ourselves be raising for our streets is an ongoing challenge too. But, look forward to having continued conversations on that.
Can you just remind us the parameters there? You're saying that now, I know that in order to do a sales tax increase, we need to go to the legislature first and then to the voters.
Correct.
But you added another thing that I want to make sure all colleagues are aware of.
Council President Bremner and council members, I can get the specific language. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it is relatively boxed in on what cities are able to do. And if you look at the ones that have been most recently approved, it's not very much on the street side. It's much more on big new facilities. It's things about, big convention centers and police stations and things like that. It's not about deferred maintenance as much. And so I mean, I think that's not to say that that's impossible, but it just is the reality that we have to operate in at the legislature to be able to advocate for our needs.
So it would be if we had like 10 street projects that we wanted to do, that would probably fare better than we just want money for street maintenance.
Correct, and also identifying streets that have a regional significance that aren't state streets. So those are the other, challenges.
Everything leading to Kalamazoo.
Right. Well, and I was thinking like in a small city, you can get a whole city to rally around a rec center in our city to try to make the case that everybody should pay sales tax to pay for the North End Community Center isn't as easy of a task, even though it's a worthy investment. I just think it's with a larger city, if you don't have that broad connection to all points of the community, then it's really hard to sell it. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. And Mr. McCarthy, I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm suggesting sort of an ongoing conversation about this, because I think it is a strategy and a process, not just me getting angry all of a sudden at a budget meeting. But for example, is it part of our legislative agenda to make those changes in statute that we need so that the sales tax process or other types of revenue generation for cities? I mean, Minnesota is an extremely restrictive state for cities to raise revenue, but so, what's our plan rather than just lamenting the conditions of that? And then I'm also curious, it would be great to have a presentation. I don't think we've had one yet, but the infrastructure funding from the federal government, I know a lot of us had high hopes for what that would be able to do in the community. I've heard a lot of questions from my constituents about how we can use that for roads and bridges and other things. So if that's part of Public Works' presentation, that would be great. But otherwise, maybe we can schedule a briefing just on those federal sources too.
That's a great suggestion. We can note that.
Ms. Yang had a hand up.
Thanks, Council President. Director Rodriguez, I first want to say thank you for your leadership and for your willingness to even be a director of Parks and Rec here in St. Paul. It's been really moving to hear your story about how Parks and Rec has impacted your life and how it's transformed. So just to see where you are today is really incredible and shows me the potential that our department has and like we as a city have in bringing up like really amazing youth and having them continue to give back to our city. I want to say that I'm so blown away by all of the work done by Parks and Rec in my office alone. Every year that you all have relaunched the Right Track program, we have taken in interns. They've had a really great experience. They want to come back. They want to continue referring other youth to join it too. So I'm really supportive of that. And in my own personal life, I just took my nieces and nephews to Village Hoops the other day. They played basketball and had a blast, and we want to continue bringing them there. And so I can go on for days and days to talk about how amazing our Parks and Rec department is. And you are coming into your role as, during a really tough time where we have so many competing priorities. And I wish that we had all the money in the world to make everything happen. And I wanted to ask you, this is something that I feel we should ask every single department that comes in front of us. Like, with all the 2023 changes that you're proposing, what's the priority for you? How would you rank it? Like from this is my top priority to, to the least priority. And I understand they're all priorities, and that's why they are here in front of us. The other thing I want to ask too is for deferred maintenance. And this is something that we can do offline too, but I'd really like to understand like what's all in that, because $100 and almost $3 million is a lot of money. I'm sure it's a lot of projects too. So what's actually in that? What's a priority for Parks and Rec when it comes to deferred maintenance? There's so many projects within all of our wards that we want to get done. And so I'd really like to understand that more. And so if you all can provide that at some time, that'd be really wonderful. And again, thanks so much for all the work that you're doing.
Councilmember Gay, thank you. I appreciate that. And to focus on the deferred maintenance question, we can certainly follow up with information. We have great data and information on that. Tom Hagel, our operations manager, who is in the crowd here, he and his team do a great amount of work in inventorying that information and prioritizing needs. But we have a pretty comprehensive list of projects across park spaces throughout the city that we could share. Specific to priorities, this is one definitely for sure in terms of how we maintain our infrastructure, but also looking for innovative ways to do that. If that's through public-private partnership, if that's through nonprofit support, where we can help improve park amenities, that's what I'm willing to explore. that's one element, but just other priorities for me revolve around programming for our young people, remaining relevant in that space and innovative, and trying to break down those fee barriers for years to come. That has shown a tremendous amount of improvement. When those are eliminated, we see participation skyrocket. So we'll continue to work on ways that we can do that.
I did look ahead and saw the next slide was questions. So that's why we're just kind of going.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Thank you, Council President Brenmo. What I would say just on this last slide is just reaffirming what we've already talked about. But I do want to stop and say thank you to OFS and the Mayor's Office and others around this deferred maintenance discussion. I think this is a start toward improvement, and if we can look towards ways to consistently funding that for future cycles, I think we can catch up on this backlog. But to have the opportunity to talk about this $24 million and how it's allocated, we look forward to that discussion, and hopefully we'll start making some headway on some of these projects. That's all I have for you today.
Great. I will look to I know we scattershotted questions throughout the presentation, which echoing Ms. Yang is well done, and really, it's really wonderful to get caught up on what's going on with parks and to see you stepping into this role so effortlessly. It's great. Looking to my colleagues to see if there's questions. Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a few general comments. I guess I wrote down my notes throughout the presentation. A couple things. I just want to say a lot of the programming that I see, or new programs, make a lot of common sense. Things like free sports for youth, or the credit recovery and things like that. But it should be recognized that someone first needs to recognize that there's a disconnect between programs or a need there, and then also implement the program. So they make so much sense when we hear them on a bullet point here, but I just want to appreciate your creative workers who recognize the program and then also worked with someone like SPPS to do that. I do really, and I know you recognized it, but the free rec services or the free rec sports I think is so important for our young people. It's something that, my mom used to always say, I don't trust you with idle hands, Chris, when I was a young kid. And I think for a lot of kids that's true. And teams and sports, we want our young people to join positive teams rather than alternatives. And I think sports teams are one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways that many young people find those positive teams, positive role models and coaches, and quite frankly, just have a positive use of their energy at a young age. And so I just think that's a huge deal. And I think it's something that, I would, as we do it with ARP dollars, I think it's something that we need to monitor closely and look at for the future of what it could mean, because a parent who can't afford to sign their kid up to a sports team shouldn't be a reason a kid doesn't have an opportunity to join one of those teams. Also want to recognize the huge work that Right Track has done. The program, it's interesting, Director Pinker and I were reminiscing about the start of the program, and I know many were a part of that. And to see it now is just amazing. So I just want to continue the creative work and the continued partnerships, both with SPPS, but even more so now with the county, I think is really an important thing. And just keep going to your team, Erica and others. Keep going with that. Also want to flag aquatics and talk about what an awesome job they did this summer and continue to do. I think every community, the YMCA, I know the YMCA, I'd been at the YMCA a few times where they closed because they didn't have lifeguards. They just said, sorry, everyone needs to get out. And I know some pools were closing earlier. I think I read 3 articles in the New York Times about lifeguard shortages across the country this summer. And we didn't have that issue. And actually we did a bonus start and a bonus end at least one of our pools. And I think that's just awesome. So to David and Amanda and that whole team, awesome job recruiting, and the young people is a great experience. I think for the lifeguards, they did a fantastic job. But I think it should be recognized how fortunate we are to have had our pools open all summer with, as far as I could tell, no closings because of staff shortages. And that's something I bet there isn't a city in the country that didn't have that issue. Big picture, I will say, and I really appreciate that Parks continues to adapt and evolve, whether it's the pickleball court at Edgecombe that I see when I walk by there on Saturday, Sunday. It is packed all the time with teams. And they're actually, they invite people to join who happen to be walking by. I haven't taken them up on it yet, but have been invited a few times. But continue to adapt and evolve as sports change, as preferences change, and just how we use parks change. And I just want to say, keep going with that. We really appreciate it, and I know it's recognized in the neighborhood. I've said this at past things, but I have seen more people, especially since the pandemic, use every one of our park spaces in different ways, more than I've ever seen in my life. And so continue to provide that. A lot of great things going on, but a few things that I just want to put out here, further challenges, because Parks continues to meet the previous challenges that I've given. One, back to what Councilmember Prince was mentioning, and we were talking about volunteers, and Andy, you and I have talked about this, but I think really trying to ramp up our volunteers or friends of, Crosby Park or whatever, things for every park, I think could be a good thing. I know, that the shining example, at least in Mac Groveland, is the volunteers at Groveland Rec Center for the winter for the ice skating and things like that. But I think a lot of our other parks have people in neighborhoods who want to support them. They just don't know how to get involved. And I know for me, for a lot of people, it offers buy-in to the park where they really care about it, but also an opportunity to bring their kids to volunteer and get their buy-in on working in the park. So I think ramping up that program for each park would be beneficial in a way that we can meet some of these, not the big deferred maintenance issues, but some of the day-to-day issues that we have. And then the last challenge I want to put to Parks, and Andy, you and I have talked about this previously, and I know we're working on it with our aquatics and the Friends of, I'm blanking on it, Friends.
The Highland Park Aquatics.
Yeah, thank you, and others. And there's fundraising and partnerships with the Abbey Hope Foundation and things like that. But I think we should challenge ourselves to have a goal of every kid in the city learning how to swim. I think it's a really important life skill, both for life safety and public safety, but also something I think a lot of kids and a lot of people, quite frankly, there's adults who can't swim either, many adults in our city. They're missing out on one of the best amenities by being nervous to go into a pool, or not feeling comfortable to go to a pool, or not take their kids to a pool. And I've continued to say I don't think there's a bigger smile in the world than when you see a kid comfortably swimming in a pool. It's just a fantastic exercise. So I think it's something that we should figure out how to challenge that. It was interesting sitting with some of the council right track interns just on a little meeting that we were talking. We're like, well, we got to get every kid to swim, and a couple of the interns themselves didn't know how to swim. And it just reinforced to me how important it is for us to ensure that every kid in the city has the opportunity and ability to swim. So that's my gauntlet challenge for this year. I'm sure you'll meet it.
Councilmember Tolbert, thank you for that. A couple comments just on the volunteer services. 100% agree. I think there's volunteer support that could be leveraged in a more formal fashion. It does require some administrative resources on the back end to help mobilize those groups and get those things started. We have a volunteer coordinator that works within our regional park spaces and others, but if we were to expand further, we probably need further support to help make that happen. But people love their park spaces and are willing to invest their time to help maintain them, and I think we need to capitalize on that to further help with just some of the maintenance things that happen day to day. So we'll definitely look into that for the future. On aquatics, I think that's a great concept. I think starting with the rec check program or something in the future would be a good baseline for that work to really spearhead that effort. And courtesy of the DNR grant we were able to do that with 300 young people this summer, and hopefully we can expand that for the future and teach every kid in the city how to swim.
And I heard Mr. Tolbert also talking about adults swimming, and I know I've heard Asha Schaffner talking about trying to get parents and adults involved in activities as well. A lot of times they'll step aside and let their kid have an opportunity, but to have adults also have those opportunities would be really cool. And kids are going to be safer swimming if their parents are comfortable in the water, and also know what they shouldn't be comfortable doing in the water as well. You know, the first thing they tell you when you take lifeguard training is the last thing you should do is go in. You know, it's like reach something, throw something, and so just understanding that. So I appreciate that, and I know that Mr. Bellinger has also mentioned that as a priority, so I think that there's a lot of interest in that. And I would just add to the volunteer piece. I know Mr. Rodriguez, we've talked about this as well, just because the Friends of Como has an excellent volunteer, I think 1,000-person volunteer database, and it's like we have the blueprint, and we can start and expand it from, you know, what we already know and do well. I feel like in our modern times, sometimes people expect somebody else to pick up that garbage. They think somebody else is going to take care of things, and if we felt empowered to do that ourselves, perhaps we would. Sometimes I think we don't know if it's allowed. I see little shooters coming out of the bottom of a tree that make it hard to see around a corner, and there's a part of me that's like, I could take care of that, but I don't want to get in trouble. And so there's that other piece of it too, where it's like, what can I do, what can't I do? And I think just making it really clear, like, we're part of a team here, folks, and if we're all pitching in, our city's going to look better, would be a great message, not just to, from Parks. And I know that, you know, we've heard about it a bit from the administration, but that's yet to really launch and take hold. But we have 330,000 people on our team. Like, let's put them to work. Mr. Lawley's had a hand up.
Thanks. My comment is really more of a plug for the system survey. So at the beginning, we talked about the system planning process underway with Visible City, and I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that again, and maybe it's a good closing note because it's about getting input from our community directly on just setting vision and values and really learning more about how they experience the parks. And I just went through a huge redesign community imagining process for a different city facility with a different department with the Hamlin Midway Library. And one of the things that I learned from that, having surveyed the community a lot, was it's really important to get the online survey out there and have lots and lots of different channels and strategies. It also was very important to do in-person, like basically canvassing or pop-ups. And actually one of the most interesting, useful findings or just data sets that we got was taking paper surveys to the Midway Cub Foods, the Hamlin High Rise, the Urban Lights Record Shop, Blessing Salon, like just a lot of different Midway businesses in the neighborhood, and including and specifically businesses of color, and basically giving people the one-page version that they could write their feedback on. And I would really encourage the Parks Department to look at that if you aren't already. I think just actually having a short version of this in every single rec center, pool, wherever people are using our system, and just like creating visuals so that we can get the word out and get the people who are using our systems into that. I'm sure that's already underway, but this is awesome. So here's what we have. And I just want for everyone here to spread the word of getting this out, because I think that's really important. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for all the work going into that. And I'll be pushing that out from our office so that we can notch up the rankings to #1 in the country, because we've been at 2 for quite some time, and I'm very proud of that. And I also think we could be the best. So thank you for all your hard work and all the good work on display in here. And just wanted to appreciate the investments in my ward too of Westgate and all the work that has gone into futsal courts and just, you know, our changing community in our part of the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Jalali. Appreciate it.
I would just, well done. And just, I know, really doing a good job here. So, and I'm sure you probably are going to say you've already done this, but I got a tip at a meeting in the North End that these types of things belong in laundromats, because there's people hanging out with nothing to do, and everybody is in the laundromats, so hang them up there too. I know Ms. Nicker has something to add, as well as Ms. Prince.
Thanks, Council President. I have 3 very specific questions or suggestions, but before that, I tend to get really analytical and into the weeds really quickly in budget time, and I just want to back up and say, inspired by Mr. Tolbert, that I appreciate everything you do, and as a former teacher and youth connector, everything that you do, especially in rec, is so appreciated. So thank you. And now the details. So I hear a lot from my constituents about trees, and I was really excited to see the work that your department is doing with the greening of the city. I think this could be an awesome right track tech internship to have someone. I just went to St. Paul Forestry to look at the website. I think it could be a great improvement to that page to have a graphic that actually shows in the greening of our city. You're doing so much, it could be portrayed, I think, better, and people would really appreciate seeing how much is happening. I'm curious about donations at Como, to the point about being creative about revenue increases. I know we asked for a higher suggested donation in 21. I didn't see information as to how that's panning out, as well as credit card donations. And then I know your department responded really thoroughly to all of our budget questions. Thank you for that. One of them about the fee schedule. It's really important to us to make sure that we're covering our costs with our fees. And this is not about athletics fees or youth programming. I'm more concerned about participant fees in races, for example. And if we could increase from $2 to $3 to cover our costs for every runner, and then could provide more free youth programming, I would be really interested in that. So I know you said that fees really haven't increased much for a while. And so again, not the ones for that are barriers to entry for our residents, but the ones that really need to cover our costs, especially when people are coming from outside to use our facilities. I just want to encourage you to look at those and make sure that those are being increased. I know DSI increases theirs regularly now, especially to cover inflation. So those are my 3 questions / suggestions.
Thank you, Councilmember Naker. Well heard on the trees, and one of the things across our department is just how we showcase our work and what we do and tell our story. So that is something we can continue to work on with a focus on trees, and whether it's website updates or pushing out information, we can certainly do that. We can report back on donations for Como Zoo. I know we have that information. I just don't have it readily available in front of me. And then lastly, on the fees, it is something that we annually review and can certainly look at, park picnic, shelter rates, and other things, and assess whether or not increases are needed in those areas. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. I know Jessica Larson Johnston did a little research after we heard about the changes with the shelters, just to understand like what private places charge, what other cities charge, and we have some of that information just as a snapshot. Happy to share. And I also will add that, and not knowing how feasible this is, that I just got back from a heck of a trip in Wisconsin, and they are unabashedly Wisconsinist. And if you don't have a Wisconsin license plate on your car, you pay more. They will charge more for anyone who doesn't pay taxes in Wisconsin. And it's an interesting kind of even second car. So I don't know if there's any opportunity as well to have a different fee for residents and non-residents as well.
That's a great idea.
A Wisconsinist, it might not be a word. Okay, and now and Ms. Prince, so just throwing that out there, and the laundromat thing. Ms. Prince.
And Andy, I want to say how great it is that we have a parks director who we raised ourselves. It's just so great that you came up through the system. It's a real tribute to the fact that I believe our last parks director came up through the system, and I think it's a great thing. And in the short time you've been here, I really appreciate your priorities. That all my colleagues have spoken to them. The free youth sports programs, and for the people I represent, is incredibly, incredibly important. And I just want to say on the volunteer thing, as you know, the Friends of Sweet Hollow want to create a stewardship program. Urban Roots is willing to train them, and it's on this issue of vegetation management. It's deadheading those terrible
burdock and other things.
Burdock,
Yeah.
that's it, burdock, and getting all the garlic mustard out of the park, and people are ready to do it. So it's a matter of, I know the challenges are great in terms of working with all the people who are ready to go to work, but that's one that we could start right away. And your responsiveness is really remarkable. The fact that we are about to get half-pipe skateboard facility in Battle Creek based on the idea of a handful of people and the willingness of the larger skateboarding community and a couple of vendors to come together and put together a match with us with my funding from Ward 7 Star as well as Parks and this private donation. So the ability of your staff to put that together in a matter of a couple of months was phenomenal. So I just want to restate what's been said here. I think Ms. Naker's questions of Mr. McCarthy about the maintenance stuff and putting together a long-term plan and figuring out how we're going to tackle this is something that we want to be part of that solution. So I just want to make clear that is my goal. But this is a good budget. It's hard to see a 15% levy increase in the city. You have only modestly increased your budget. I appreciate that, and it's a challenge for us going forward to put together a budget for the whole city that's going to work for our taxpayers. But thank you for your presentation today and for all the work that your staff does.
Thank you, Councilmember Prince. Just a quick note on Sweet Hollow that we did launch the Volunteer Steward Program earlier this week officially.
Oh, very good.
So we will send you that information. We're super excited about that. A lot of hard work and dedicated folks that are willing to help out there.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Mr. Ballinger.
I just want to echo what everyone's been saying in terms of you're doing a wonderful job with the parks. I was a playground kid, and my family, my children and grandchildren love the playgrounds and the rec centers. I was just recently made aware that the kids could swim for free, and it did my heart good. I would also like to see the parents that need to be able to swim for free and come be able to do that, because I think it's the parents that bring the children to the rec center, and if they see that they're involved, they'll remain involved and later bring theirs. So thanks. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, Councilmember Ballinger. It was a great time touring spaces with you yesterday. It just reminded me too on aquatics that we do have an after-school program focused on teens at Great River Water Park multiple times per week. That is, their words, off the chain. Very, very fun, very packed, very well loved. And David and others have done a great job there.
Other comments? It's always fun when we have budgets to have your team here as well, your leadership team. I don't know if you want to acknowledge people individually or just say, hey, team. But we all have an opportunity to work with members of the Parks leadership team for various reasons throughout the year, and we truly appreciate you and your work. And it's fun when we go through the budget presentation, and hopefully you get a sense of how much we care about your work and how much we care about making sure that you get the resources that you need as well. And so this is a nice opportunity for us to kind of all be in the same place and recognize we're all pulling the same direction. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Council President Brenmone. Yes, I would like to invite each one individually up to the mic. I can't say enough about this team and their experience and the ability to move this work forward. The amount of things that we deal with daily is a lot, and they do a great job in keeping this, steering this ship forward. So thank you for that.
Anything else before we wrap up this budget presentation? Okay, it looks like you've done it.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez, well done. All right. So if I will turn things over to Ms. Houston just to update us and remind us where we're headed in the next few weeks on budget and other items.
Thank you, Council President Brenmone and council members. So this afternoon we'll be hearing from the HRA and PED budget at 2 p.m. And then next week on Tuesday evening at 5:30 we have the Como Lakeside Pavilion public hearing on the budget, and then the levy limit will be voted on next week, September 21st at 3:30.
So we'll have to basically we have become It's become a tradition to have a public hearing well in advance of our budget deliberations because our truth and taxation hearing happens about the same exact time as we pass the budget, and there is frustration about that from community members and really from us. That's something that's required by the state of Minnesota and not something we do. It doesn't make sense, honestly. So we have opted to do a hearing in the front end. This is an opportunity for people to weigh in on the proposed levy, the proposed budget. So that will happen on Tuesday, as Ms. Houston said, and then we'll set the levy limit the next day. So we'll have the whole day to think about what people say, and we'll go ahead and do that. We'll hear from the Garbage Advisory Committee today at the council meeting. So we are expecting about a 15-20 minute presentation from them. They're the most jazzed up group about garbage ever, and I think the presentation is going to be fantastic. We do not have a public hearing about rent stabilization today, but there are amendments coming forth. So I think that our meeting will not be particularly long in that sense, but if an amendment passes, of course, we won't have a final vote on that until next week. To give you a lay of the land. So a lot ahead of us yet today, but we started out here in Ward 3 in Rec Center, and I think that that's a good way to start the day. So there's nothing else to come before us.